Hello students. Hi. So here we are this week talking in Unit 5 about cinematography and editing. Two really big subjects that we're going to try to condense together because in a way they do actually work very closely together. Cinematography is the art of what the camera itself is doing, the pictures that the camera is taking. And then editing is where they get into the editing room and decide which takes they're going to use and cut and splice and put it all together. So they're very, very much together. So we've been building our films, right? So in the beginning, we talked about the history of films, and then we start with the script, the screenplay, and then after we've got the script and the screenplay ready, and we've got the actors chosen, they build this world of the film, they build the sets, they build the costumes, they gather the props. So that's all the prep work that goes into it. Now they're ready to actually start filming and then editing. Oscar winner cinematographer Conrad Hall has been quoted as saying, "Cinematography is infinite in its possibilities, much more so than music or language." Now see, I love music and I love language, so I don't completely agree with him. Like, I think music and language have a lot of possibilities. But I do understand what he means in the sense that with language we are limited perhaps by the number of words in the language itself, or we might be limited by speaking different languages. But a Spanish speaker and an English speaker can both look at a really beautiful mountain vista, and you don't need words for that to translate. So I get what Hall is saying. So one of the first things that is decided in cinematography is the actual placement of the camera. In the early days, remember these pre-Hollywood days when Edison and Lumiere brothers and Méliès are just really moving the technology forward. Remember, Edison basically would put the camera in front of whatever was happening, and it would be static. The camera would stay in place and just look at what was happening from front. And so you would get just this really clinical look. Then the Lumiere brothers decided to take the camera to an angle. This was revolutionary at the time, right? So we get the train coming at us from the side, from an angle. So that's the Lumiere brothers. Now we of course can have the camera all over the place. We have it on cranes, and we have it from every different possible angle. But that is the early thing that has to get decided, is the actual placement of the camera. When they put the camera in place, then they're gonna, this is something super fun. There's a job in Hollywood called the gaffer. These are the guys who tape down and set all the cable work and do everything that has technically to do with getting the camera actually in its home. And then the actors, when they come into a scene, you don't see this as the viewer, but there are little bits of tape on the floor and all kinds of things so that when the actors maybe stop to deliver a line, they've actually hit a mark, literally a mark of tape on the floor, so that they are framed exactly where the cinematographer and director want them to be. It's not accidental in the making and filming of a movie. So you get your camera placement, you get the angle of the camera. Some different camera angles might be a low angle where the camera is below and looking up. A low angled camera does give a sense of power to the characters that are on the camera. So that's low angle looking up. High angle cinematography, that might diminish the power of the character. It makes the character maybe look more vulnerable. That's certainly a thing that can happen. It is more flattering, so if you're wanting to have your actor look particularly beautiful, you might do them from above. You can have the angle of eye level. This is the angle that a cinematographer would choose to use if he wants the viewer to be right in the scene, so that the camera is shooting at eye level, so that conversations that happen at eye level, you feel like you're there and you're part of the conversation. And then a canted angle is the camera tilted diagonally, and that angle might be used to throw the audience off balance a little bit. I used to love to watch the vintage Batman series with Adam West. I'm dating myself here, but they were actually made before I was born. They were showing in syndication when I was a kid. And they used these all the time. Batman and Robin were constantly fighting on what looked like slanted floors, just to kind of throw things off balance. So you've got your canted angle. After you've decided the placement of the camera, the angle of the camera, you talk about the distance of the camera. How much is the camera going to try to take in this shot? So you may have an extreme long shot, like a mountain. This happens in Westerns a lot. You get a really big shot of the mountains, like all the way across the screen. Big, extreme, long shot. Then you have something called a long shot. There is still some distance. You can see the setting around what's happening. You can see the entire human body. Then you have your medium shot, which is typically your actors from the waist up. And it's our most natural feeling shot. It's the one that we see the most and the one we're most used to. Then you have a close-up, which pulls you in more to the face. Right here. We also see a lot of that, especially in conversations or when the director wants us to see a reaction shot. Maybe there's no words, but we just want to see how the actor, how the character responds to something that we don't even see happening off screen. And then you have your extreme close-up, where it's maybe just your eyes, just the mouth. Just the eyes gets used a lot more because the eyes are so expressive, right? Or maybe just a hand. So those are some different, and there's every gradation in between. There's the mountain vista all the way to just the eyeballs, and then there's every possible thing in between there. When the director and cinematographer are communicating, they need to be able to speak at least a common language, so that if the director says, hey, cinematographer, I need a close-up shot, the cinematographer at least knows kind of where they're starting from. And then the director may want to adjust it up or down or something like that, but they at least have a common language to come to the table with when they're trying to make a plan. This is where storyboarding also helps a lot. In storyboarding, the cinematographer often and director, perhaps working together, it's different. Different directors and cinematographers work differently. They create a storyboard that shows how the story is going to evolve pictorially. It almost could look like a comic book in a sense, because they've drawn out shot by shot each panel. When it's time to film, there is a shot list that has been made so that the cinematographer and her crew can basically look and know day by day by day by day what equipment they need, where it's going to be put, and they don't waste a lot of time in filming trying to figure these things out, because time is money. For every minute that you're spending filming and trying to figure things out, you're having to pay your crew, your actors, your craft services, the rental on the lot, whatever. So you create a shot list and maybe a storyboard ahead of time. Everyone has a different process, but you are going to have some process ahead of time, hopefully, so that you come to shooting prepared. You have your tracking shots. Tracking shots are these moving shots, point A to point B, one smooth line. They're accomplished by putting the camera on a dolly. The camera could be on tracks, like they actually look like little railroad tracks. This is part of what all the gaffers and stuff do. They lay down these tracks, and then the camera's on wheels and it rolls down as it shoots. You could have a Steadicam, which is on this long pole. It's got the fulcrum, so you've got the camera and there's a fulcrum coming back here so that it doesn't do this, and some springs and stuff. And it was all put together by the guy who invented it, and you would carry it as this big, long apparatus. It was invented back in the early 70s. Now we have a Steadicam that sits on a harness that goes around. It can go around your waist and over your shoulders so that your body helps to bear some of that weight. It's really very fascinating, actually. And then the camera, even though you're moving and walking as you operate it, it's not bouncing and moving. So you've got all these different ways to get a tracking shot. It could be a dolly, it could be a track, it could be a Steadicam. Then you've got something called subjective camera, which is the camera moving along with the character. This doesn't happen all that often. It's kind of a first-person point of view GoPro situation. GoPro is the easiest thing I can think of to tell you what subjective camera looks like. It would be like the camera is sitting on here of the head of the character. Doesn't happen in film a lot, but if you've seen the movie Hardcore Henry, that film is shot entirely in first person. Camera right here on the character's head. Then you have handheld. This has been a trend that I think might be beginning to fade, but in I'd say the last 10 years or so, and we're coming out of it. It's used to imply realism, like Paranormal Activity, Blair Witch Project, Saving Private Ryan. They use it a lot in the opening sequence there on the beach, because they're trying to give you this idea of you are actually in there in the action, maybe even sort of like with your own video camera. So it's you carrying a video camera and video recording as it goes. That was a very big trend. I think we'll keep seeing it, but we might see less of it. It stays, I think, pretty active in the horror genre, and it makes perfect sense over there in horror. All right, so back in the 30s, remember our silent films are all black and white unless they were hand tinted. They were hand tinted. They went in with toners and painted in sometimes some color. It's faded over time. So now it just looks black and white. But there actually was toning and coloring happening back then by hand. That said, really predominantly you just see black and white during the silent era. So in that period, when the Academy of Motion Pictures and Sciences is giving a cinematography award, they're just doing black and white cinematography. Then in 1936, 37, 38, 39, when we start to see color, we start to see Technicolor and CinemaScope and all of those things happening, they would give a special Oscar for color. Then starting in 1940 all the way to 1966, they gave one for each: a black and white cinematography, a color cinematography. Then by 1966, there wasn't enough black and white still being made to justify it having its own Oscar. So cinematography then went to just being color, really. Oh gosh, about 8 years ago, I guess, The Artist came out. It was a silent film. If you haven't seen it, fascinating. It's new, it's recent, it's within the last 10 years, but shot silently in black and white in the style of those old movies from the 20s and 30s. Fantastic movie, and a competitor, I think, for the Oscar, black and white.